While the Laikai wave continues to spread across the globe, there are still places longing for its touch. King Torrico is a prime example. This territory has belonged to the United States since 1898, yet to this day it has not been granted statehood. Beyond the narrative of its potential to become the 51st state of the United States, this territory also shares an extremely close connection with Cuba. Just like the song Despacito created a phenomenon in the global music scene. So what other interesting aspects does King Torrico have? In today's video, join us in just 5 minutes to explore this special territory in more detail. King Torrico Island was once a colony of the Quack people, the king of the sad port. The name originates from the vast amount of gold the Spanish discovered on the island. Besides its official name of King Torrico, this island is also affectionately called Borinque by the local people. Land of the Brave Lord. Enchanted Island. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered America. But it wasn't until the following year, upon his return to the New World, that Columbus discovered King Torrico. He stopped at this island for 2 days. Before the Europeans arrived, the island was originally inhabited by the Taino Indians. Afterward, Columbus named the island San Juan Bautista in honor of Saint John the Baptist. However, later on, the island was renamed King Torrico Island, while San Juan became the name of the capital. After discovering this land, the Spanish quickly turned the island into a colony and transformed it into a vital defensive fortress for their vast colonial system in the Americas. However, the indigenous Taino population declined drastically due to being killed in bloody conflicts and dying from diseases introduced by the Europeans. This forced the Spanish to purchase black slaves from Africa to replace them as laborers. Although King Torrico remained under the scrutiny of European powers, this land continued to be a Spanish colony for the following 4 centuries. The influx of settlers from Europe, primarily from the Canary Islands and the Andalusia region, along with enslaved Africans, profoundly transformed the island's cultural and demographic landscape. After more than 400 years as a Spanish colony, the culture of Vua Torrico has been profoundly influenced by this nation. At the end of the 19th century, Cuba and Puerto Rico were officially the last 2 colonies that Spain still controlled in the Americas. The influence of sea power upon history. He urged the U.S. government to acquire colonial territories in the Caribbean, which would become crucial naval bases for the United States. These islands served as a strategic defensive line for the construction of the Panama Canal, a waterway cutting across the Isthmus of Panama that allows ships to pass easily between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, shortening the sea voyage by more than 13,000 kilometers. William Seward, who served as Secretary of State under Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Johnson, also emphasized the importance of building a canal in Panama. He proposed that the United States annex the Dominican Republic and purchase Puerto Rico and Cuba from Spain for $160 million, equivalent to over $5.9 billion in 2023. However, Spain rejected this proposal from the United States. In 1898, an explosion sank the battleship USS Maine in Havana Harbor, Cuba. This event prompted the United States to immediately declare war on Spain. With its overwhelming power, the United States defeated the empire across the Atlantic in just 3 months. The war ended when Spain agreed to relinquish its sovereignty over Cuba and cede control of Puerto Rico, the island of Guam, and the Philippines to the United States. In return, the United States compensated Spain with $20 million, a sum equivalent to $721 million in 2023. In its first 3 decades of governance, the U.S. government made efforts to incorporate new territories, notably by granting citizenship to the people of Puerto Rico in 1917. At the same time, consideration should be given to making English the official language of the island. However, in the 1930s, a movement opposing the American assimilation policy gained widespread support on the island. Since 1948, the people of Puerto Rico have directly elected their own governor. By 1952, the U.S. Congress had approved a new constitution for Puerto Rico, making the island a self-governing commonwealth of the nation. Although they hold U.S. citizenship, the people of Puerto Rico do not have the same full rights as citizens in the states. Meanwhile, the Constitution of Puerto Rico was officially adopted on July 25, 1952. As independence movements wane, support for Puerto Rico to become a U.S. state is gaining widespread traction. In a recent referendum, the majority of Puerto Rican voters expressed support for the territory to officially become a U.S. state. Ñat Dai Island has always remained tranquil through the storms. Geographically, Puerto Rico, also known as the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, is located in the northeastern Caribbean Sea. located to the west of the Dominican Republic and to the east of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The territory of Puerto Rico is an archipelago comprising 143 islands of various sizes, with the main island of Puerto Rico being the largest, surrounded by numerous smaller islands. The largest islands are Vieques, Mona, and Culebra, respectively. Besides the main island, only Culebra and Vieques are inhabited year-round. Mona Island is part of the Mona and Manito Island Nature Reserve, which is currently inhabited only by park rangers and biologists. Puerto Rico has a total area of 9,104 square kilometers, which is equivalent to the size of Lai Chau province in our country. If it were to become a state of the United States of America, it would be the third largest state by area, right after Rhode Island and Delaware. Of these, the main island of Puerto Rico has an area of 8,897 square kilometers, accounting for up to 98% of the total area of the entire territory. The island's maximum length, west-east, is 180 kilometers, while its maximum width, north-south, is 64 kilometers. Among the major islands of the Greater Antilles, Puerto Rico is the smallest. It is only 1/10 the size of Jamaica and 8% the size of Cuba. Unlike most states in the United States, Puerto Rico is not divided into county-level administrative units. Instead, its entire territory is divided directly into 78 municipalities. For the purpose of census investigations, municipalities are generally considered equivalent to counties, with the capital, San Juan, being the most populous city. Perched on a peninsula off the city, the old quarter of Viejo San Juan is the oldest Spanish settlement in Puerto Rico. This entire area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to hundreds of Spanish colonial-style architectural structures built during the 16th and 17th centuries. Among these, the most prominent is undoubtedly the majestic El Morro Fortress. Built in 1539, this fortress was tasked with guarding the entrance to San Juan Bay, protecting the port city of San Juan from all threats coming from the sea. Regarding topography, Puerto Rico is roughly rectangular in shape, with approximately 60% of its area consisting of hills and mountains. The center of the island is dominated by a massive mountain range, most notably the La Cordillera Centro, also known as the Central Cordillera. This mountain range runs in an east-west direction, dividing the territory into two distinct parts, the north and the south. The highest point in Puerto Rico is Cerro de Punta Peak, with an elevation of 1,338 meters above sea level, and it is also entirely located within this mountain range. This is the most beautiful scenic spot in Puerto Rico. On a clear and sunny day, you can admire the entire island, even the distant capital of San Juan over 120 kilometers away. Additionally, the northern part of Puerto Rico also features a vast limestone mountain region. The northern and southern parts of the island both have narrow coastal strips. Puerto Rico has a total of 17 lakes, all of which are man-made. With over 50 rivers here, most of which originate from the central mountain range. The rivers in the northern part of the island are typically longer and have a higher flow rate compared to those in the south, which is due to the southern region receiving less rainfall than the central and northern areas. Geologically, Puerto Rico lies on the boundary between two tectonic plates, the North American Plate and the Caribbean Plate. The location at the boundary between two tectonic plates is the cause of earthquakes and tsunamis, accompanied by landslides, resulting in severe losses of both human life and property. The most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Puerto Rico was the October 11, 1918 earthquake, which reached a magnitude of 7.5 on the Richter scale. The storm claimed 116 lives and caused property damage amounting to $4 million, equivalent to approximately $81 million at today's value. Located in the tropical climate zone, Puerto Rico enjoys warm weather year-round, with average temperatures of around 29 degrees Celsius in the lowlands and 21 degrees Celsius in the high mountains. The temperature difference between months throughout the year is usually insignificant, fluctuating by only about 3.3 degrees Celsius. Southern Puerto Rico is a few degrees warmer than the north, while the highlands and mountains in the center of the island generally have a cooler climate compared to other regions. Similar to southern Vietnam, this region also has only 2 seasons in a year. That is the dry season, which usually lasts from December to March. The rainy season usually lasts from April to November. At the same time, storms in the Atlantic Ocean are also highly active. Puerto Rico received heavy rainfall. On average, tropical storms contribute a quarter of this region's annual rainfall. However, these storms caused significant damage to both lives and property. A prime example is the historic Hurricane Maria that swept through Puerto Rico in 2017. killing 2 people and causing property damage of up to $637 million. Society is composed of many different ethnic groups. According to the 2020 census data, the population of Puerto Rico is 3,286,000 people, decreased by 1.8% compared to 2010. Previously, the population of this territory had reached its peak in the year 2000. From a previous figure of 3,809,000 people, this number had decreased to 3,726,000 by 2010. The primary cause of this collapse was economic hardship and natural disasters. Along with the low birth rate, Puerto Rico has experienced a massive wave of migration to the United States. Since everyone desires to have a good job with outstanding development opportunities. And currently, more than 5.9 million Puerto Ricans are living in the United States. The population of this territory is 1.8 times larger. This also seriously negatively impacts tax collection efforts, and placing heavy pressure on debt repayment capacity. If it were to become a state of the United States of America, Puerto Rico would be the 30th most populous territory. The population of Utah is approximately. Overall, Puerto Rico is a culturally rich and diverse land, with an initial foundation formed from a blend of Spanish culture, Taino culture and African culture. Early 16th century, early 19th century. Since then, Puerto Rican culture has become even richer and more diverse, with the arrival of immigrants from non-Spanish-speaking countries. For example, France, the Netherlands, and Ireland. Even settlers from the Federation were no exception. China, Portugal, and Scotland are 3 countries and territories with distinctive cultures and histories. As of now, approximately 50% of Puerto Rico's population is of multiracial heritage. 17% are white, 7% of the population is black, 0.5% of the population is Native American. The remaining 25.5% are other ethnic groups, and those whose ethnicity has not been identified. Based on a study of mobility patterns, Puerto Ricans have approximately 61% of their genetic ancestry originating from Europe. 27% originated from the sub-Saharan African region, and 11% are of Native American origin. European descent. The population is primarily concentrated in the western and central regions of Puerto Rico. People of African descent in the eastern region. The indigenous people primarily live in the northern region. In terms of linguistic origin, Puerto Rico is the only U.S. territory with Spanish origins. Spanish is the official language. The languages used in the executive agencies are Spanish and English, with Spanish as the main language. However, all of this activity took place between the U.S. District Court and the Puerto Rican Court. Everything is conducted in English. Spanish is an important official language in the field of business, education and daily life on the island. Nearly 95% of the population uses it. Regarding religion, Roman Catholicism is the most widely practiced faith in this territory. Under Spanish rule, Protestantism once went through a period of suppression. However, it received massive support when Puerto Rico became a U.S. territory. This country is also home to the largest Jewish community in the Caribbean, with approximately 3,000 people. Meanwhile, the indigenous Taino people are still in the process of revival. Some of their religious traditions. Some African communities still preserve and practice the traditional religious beliefs of their ancestors. Currently, 56% of Puerto Rico's population is Roman Catholic. 33% of the population is Protestant. 3% of the population follows other religions. And 8% of the population does not follow any religion. The economy has experienced 16 consecutive years of recession. Puerto Rico's economy is classified as a high-income economy by the World Bank, with high income and the most competitive economy in Latin America. In 2018, the country's gross domestic product, GDP, reached $118.68 billion US dollars, with an average per capita income of $36,117. If it were to become a U.S. state, Puerto Rico would be the state with the lowest income in the entire nation, with 45% of the population living below the poverty line. However, when compared to Latin, Puerto Rico has the highest GDP per capita in the region. The primary driving force behind Puerto Rico's economy is manufacturing activity, mainly pharmaceuticals, textiles, oil and gas, and electronics. Next, we must mention the service sector. The most significant reforms are in the fields of finance, insurance, real estate, and tourism. Until the very beginning of the 20th century, Puerto Rico's economy remains primarily based on sugarcane cultivation and export. However, by the 1940s, a new economic policy has been enacted to comprehensively transform the island's economy. With a powerful transformation from an agricultural economy to a diverse industrial one. Here are some clearer and more natural ways to express this, depending on the specific context. This has contributed to making Puerto Rico one of the leading territories. It has the highest per capita income in the Americas. However, as we entered the 21st century, this region has endured countless hardships. Puerto Rico lacks sufficient natural resources to produce raw materials. Therefore, they are forced to place orders and import from abroad. Meanwhile, the U.S. government holds the authority over the nation's foreign policy. Simultaneously impose trade restrictions, particularly targeting the maritime transport sector. Since 2006, Puerto Rico has been in a state of economic recession lasting 17 consecutive years. The country is facing a severe budget crisis. When public debt reached $74 billion, this figure accounted for 68% of the 2014 GDP. This arises from Regulation 936 of the U.S. Tax Code. This offer is only applicable in Puerto Rico. Under this regulation, U.S. corporations headquartered in Puerto Rico will be eligible for tax exemption incentives. And subsidiaries operating in this territory can repatriate profits to the parent company without being subject to federal corporate income tax. When Regulation 936 expires. At the same time, U.S. companies also began withdrawing from Puerto Rico. By 2015, Moody's declared that Puerto Rico had officially defaulted. When this region was plunged into a deep economic crisis, they could never pay off the enormous debt weighing on their shoulders. A year after the default, among the more than 3 million residents of Puerto Rico, only about 1 million people have jobs. Not everyone has reached working age yet, but the unemployment rate on the island has exceeded 12%. Job scarcity, particularly for high-paying positions. This situation is exactly what was mentioned in the previous section, when it occurred after just 5 minutes. Court records related to the bankruptcy case also reveal a list of Puerto Rico's 20 largest creditors. Leading the way is Puerto Rico's Banco Popular with an amount of up to $2 billion. Another notable name worth mentioning is the technology giant Microsoft. When Puerto Rico still owed this corporation over $8 million in service fees. The tourism industry has been effectively promoted through 11 distinctive songs. Tourism is considered one of the key economic sectors of Puerto Rico. It brings in about $1.8 billion annually. In 1999, this island welcomed approximately 5 million tourist visits. The majority of these come from the United States, and nearly a third are cruise ship passengers. In 2009, tourism contributed 7% to Puerto Rico's GDP. However, unfortunately for Puerto Rico, its tourism industry has fallen into crisis. When the Zika epidemic broke out in August 2016. But right in the midst of those difficulties, a miracle emerged, bringing a new vitality to the economy. Despacito. This phrase also quickly became a global phenomenon, when consistently leading in views on YouTube. The song is set in Puerto Rico and tells a love story. There, endless canals stretch into the distance, lined with brick houses painted in vibrant colors. Alongside that are the unique cultural features that have been preserved intact. Despacito. When attracting a large number of international tourists, you want to learn about the homeland of the male singer Luis Fonsi. And also thanks to the absolutely stunning cinematography. According to the newspaper Unravel, the number of tourists visiting this country. Since the song became famous worldwide, that figure is 1%. Through just one song, you'll understand our experience of living in Puerto Rico. Despacito. Tour operators in Puerto Rico. Additional locations mentioned in the song have also been explored. To serve tourists, some places like Club La Factoria, for example. Perhaps the La Puella district in the town of Turo, San Juan. If you don't want to go to the bustling city of San Juan, you can also visit El Yunque National Forest. Strolling along the forest trails, you can admire and learn more about hundreds of plant species here. Just like many other small-sized animals, the most notable species is undoubtedly the coqui frog. This species is found only in Puerto Rico. It produces a clear and resonant sound, especially in the evening. This frog is also considered an unofficial national symbol of Puerto Rico. If you want to swim in the sea, Vieques is the premier resort destination in Puerto Rico. When the U.S. military withdrew from the island in 2003, Vieques focuses on developing its tourism sector. This island is also known for a fascinating natural phenomenon, found only in Mosquito Bay, where the deep blue sea waves lap against the sandy shore. This phenomenon is caused by a special type of vessel. At night, they emit a brilliant neon blue light, and creating this magnificent phenomenon. You can experience this natural wonder by boat or canoe. Passionate about surfing, you shouldn't. This place has been a surfer's paradise since 1968. After the World Surfing Championship was held here, Dinkan was battered by waves as high as 4.5 meters. Dinkan is also one of the top destinations for whale watching. Whale watching season typically runs from mid-January through the end of March each year, when pods of humpback whales swim leisurely through the ocean. The last colony of the United States, throughout 125 years as part of U.S. territory. The relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States has experienced many ups and downs. Specifically, Puerto Rico has been a U.S. territory since 1898, when this country's military captured the island from the Spanish colonists, when the United States recognized the territorial sovereignty of Cuba and the Philippines. Since 1898, Puerto Rico has been a territory of the United States of America, when the National Army captured the island from the Spanish colonists. Therefore, the people of Puerto Rico remain steadfast in their belief that one day their island will formally regain its independence. But instead of doing so, the United States still considers this region a pivotal point. It was not until 1917 that the people of Puerto Rico were granted U.S. citizenship. And it was not until 1952 that this territory was officially permitted to have its own constitution. Since then, Puerto Rico has enjoyed a relatively autonomous status with its own constitution and governorship. These new laws were proposed and passed without requiring approval from the United States. And the governor of Puerto Rico is also directly elected by the people. Residents here only have to pay federal taxes on the portion of income earned from work performed in the United States. They are also entitled to Social Security benefits, as well as benefiting from personal health care and medical programs like Medicare. Puerto Ricans are recognized as U.S. citizens, but they do not have the full rights of citizens living in other U.S. states. However, they do not have the right to vote for the president. You are only allowed to vote in presidential primary elections. Additionally, Puerto Rico has only one representative in Congress. This person can participate in committees and propose bills. However, they did not have the right to vote. The centuries-long colonial status is precisely the cause of Puerto Rico's complex political situation today. Although numerous methods have been employed to liberate this land from colonial-style rule, this issue has been and continues to be discussed and debated for decades. And so far, 6 referendums have been held. However, typically, Puerto Rican residents will have 3 options. First and foremost, maintain the status quo. That means Puerto Rico will remain a U.S. Commonwealth territory. Some experts have proposed upgrading this status to that of a prosperous middle class, while continuing to maintain relations with the United States, or a sovereign associated state. Accordingly, Puerto Rico will effectively operate as an independent nation, but has a close relationship with the United States. Second, Puerto Rico will become an independent nation. That means this country will have full self-determination. However, it might face economic difficulties if it separates from the United States. Third, Puerto Rico will be recognized as the 51st state of the United States. With this option, the island will receive financial support, and social welfare is increasingly enhanced through U.S. policies. But the current constitution will be lost. Sadly, it has already strayed far from the U.S. Constitution. In the tournaments held in 1967, 1991, 1993, and 1998, the majority of Puerto Rican voters wished to maintain the current political status. In the 2012 referendum, as many as 61% of Puerto Rican voters supported the nation's independence. This is an independent country, and these independent nations have continued to develop and prosper. Since 2017, this figure has even reached 97% of participating voters. Based on the common context of similar phrases, the original passage may have contained a spelling error. The clearest and most natural rewrite, preserving the intended meaning, is despite the overwhelming majority of votes in favor. However, this result does not accurately reflect the true intentions of all the people of Puerto Rico. In reality, the voter turnout rate only reached 23%. This is a record low in history, because the majority of Puerto Rican voters cast their ballots in favor of U.S. statehood. From 2020, the 6th referendum, the government of Puerto Rico has posed a question, directly or indirectly. Specifically, the issue at hand is whether Puerto Rico should immediately. It's over. You should change your mindset. For the majority of Puerto Rican people, and the 6th wish of the Italian people, Thank you, Puerto Rico. Congratulations, National Magazine. The aspiration to become the 51st state of Puerto Rico. Thank you, Puerto Rico. Thank you to the participating country, Puerto Rico. Congratulations, Puerto Rico, a self-governing nation. Admit immediately into the United States as a state or not. Was 52.34%, while those who chose. Therefore, in 2021, Bill H.R. 1522, also known as the Puerto Rico Statehood Admission Act, was introduced. This bill has conveyed an extremely clear perspective